Well, good afternoon, everyone. We wanted to welcome you to today's Directors Dialogue City from the APA City Planning and Management Division. We're excited to have everyone here for our quarterly event. Um, just a little bit about the division. The mission is to support public sector planners and managers in their roles to build inclusive and sustainable cities and communities. And you can find out more about the division here on our link tree. You can register for the next Directors Dialogue in November. You can volunteer for a committee. We have several committees that are needing good volunteers, especially our Student Ambassador Committee. So if you are interested, please get in touch with us. There are a couple other events that you can register for. You can view our recent newsletter articles or submit an article if you're interested in doing that. Tell us about your recent promotions or exciting news and apply for grants when the division has them available. So if you're interested in any of that information, please use the QR code to connect with us directly. Each director's dialogue can earn you one CM credit. I'll be sure to put the link to that in the chat for you so that you're able to do that. And then if you'd like to watch this or any of our series events, you can do that on our YouTube channel, youtube.com at APA City. So with that, I will pass it over to Travis. Did you want to do an introduction first?
Yeah, I'll do a very quick, very simple introduction. Patrice,
Okay.
thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
So thanks everybody, like Patrice said, for joining us today. Excited to speak on this topic. Um, and of course, I'm sure you've seen the bio for our speaker Tara Paxton. Uh, Tara has just recently retired from her position as township planner for Township of Brick, New Jersey. She's got a background in private consulting, which she's doing now, as well as teaching in the planning space. And so she's got a wealth of experience that she's going to share with us today. With that, I'll just turn it over to her and ask her, can you share with us your experiences in succession planning, Tara?
Thank you, Travis. I was just telling Patrice and Travis that I just recently retired from my position as the municipal planner in the Township of Brick, New Jersey, which is in coastal New Jersey, in Ocean County. It's a community of about 75,000 people. It's my hometown and the town where I was born and raised my family. So it's a little strange not being in charge of the planning department, but I'm welcoming this new challenge. And the topic today, succession planning for planners, is derived directly from my recent experience, mistakes and pitfalls that I experienced. So I'm a firm believer that I like to learn from others' mistakes. So I'm hopeful that you'll all learn from mine. So with that, I'm going to start my presentation. And then after the presentation, we're just going to follow up with a question and answer period so that we actually can have some dialogue. Instead of being talked to, we're going to talk with one another. So I'm going to share my screen and begin the presentation. So hopefully you can all see that. Okay, there we go. Okay. So the beginning of the presentation, I kind of found this graphic really funny. The anointing of the next planner from a kingdom perspective. But before we become the anointed one, we really need to make sure that we have leadership competency. Being a director of a planning department, my department was 7 people. I was the only licensed professional planner, though. In New Jersey, we have licenses, but also AICP. So as directors, we have to look for how the department is going to work in the future. We need to communicate our vision. As planners, we're very, very adept at visioning. thinking strategically, and managing change. One of my quotable quotes is that the only constant thing in life is change. To be a good leader, you have to develop people, right? So that is at the heart of succession planning, I think, is that you need to look within and outside. So when I'm talking about succession planning, I'm not just talking about my staff internally. I'm also talking about, working with consultants, new consultants, new emerging planners. We have experiences with consulting planners all the time where a firm might have hired somebody right out of a university program, and you have interaction with them. You can develop people not by them working for you, but with you. Develop those employees, motivate them to be curious about progressing in the planning field. Provide feedback to them when they are, working on projects or presentations. And then when you have vacancies, look to hire and use the talents of a diverse workforce. The planning schools right now, I'm a professor at Rowan University as an adjunct in the urban and regional planning program. And our student body is super diverse, and it makes me very happy to be able to pull from those universities to hire a diverse workforce. Part of being a planner who's looking forward to succession is also building community. Building those partnerships internally and externally, and collaborate with, like I said, those consulting planning firms and university programs, nonprofit agencies looking to build collaboration will help, make that pool of future planners come to you. So here's where I'm going to talk about my pitfalls. So let's talk about what succession planning is not. So this photo is a photo from my retirement party, where my successor is to my right in the photo, and my successor is in the middle. And then the young man standing next to the pretty girl in the polka dot dress, who's my daughter, who, by the way, is also a planner. You can do succession planning through procreation as well. He, my anointed successor. And that was my mistake. My first mistake was anointing someone before I knew when I was going to be retiring or when he was going to be ready. So this young man was not ready when I was. So that set my whole plan as to who is going to succeed me. Just, we had to throw that out the window, and then we were sort of stuck. Who was going to fill the role? So that was mistake number one. So one of the things that we also need to look to for effective succession planning is identifying key player gaps through the workforce planning, offering skill development at every level, training, build development into everyday work, make knowledge sharing part of the routine work, and develop a deep bench, not the single successor, the mistake I made. So what we did was we sent him to training. We always offer training. We always talk to staff about what their future educational needs are. And we make sure that when we hire someone in our workforce, that they're the right fit, that we make sure that we have the right people for the work that we're doing. If we're doing redevelopment planning, we need to have people who are adept at redevelopment planning. If we're doing open space, we need environmental planners. And then turn strategic thinking into concrete steps to make sure that we keep them there, right? Doesn't always work though. So identify your gaps systematically, fill them, and tell leadership early and often how you see your program and your office proceeding in the future. Leadership is mentorship, right? I love this photo because it's the mama cat with the baby cats. I think of myself that way, being a professor and a mentor with young professionals. We have to recognize that when planners come out of school, the knowledge that they have is really only 10%. 20% is learning from others, but 70% is experience. We really need to make sure that we mentor people by empowering them to do the work themselves rather than just having them on the sideline watching what we're doing. And we need to build the professional. We need to give credit for work. We need to educate and enrich, make sure that we budget for education enrichment. Take young planners out with you when you're going on field trips, when you're going to seminars, when you're going to educational programs. Introduce them to people. Network, let them work without you. Send them to sessions on their own. I set aside some time with two of my young professionals to do study sessions for the AICP, and one of them just passed yesterday. Just found out, so I'm super excited. And then make sure that you foster outside connections with those consulting firms, other governmental agencies where young emerging planners are working. Succession planning is everyday opportunities. Embed the development into your daily operations and culture. Make sure that you're cross-training. Don't let people get stuck in silos. And one of the pitfalls, which is why my succession plan and my anointed successor did not work out, is that he was expected to do a lot more with a lot less by administration. And I think that that's one of the reasons why, by the way, a spoiler alert, he left. He left before I retired. He had an opportunity to go work in the county where I came from, which was fortuitous, for a lot more money and with a lot more flexibility and opportunity for upward mobility. So I think that be careful about how much you expect of people to do more with less, and communicate that to your administration. Every area needs help. Support flows both ways in the organization. And I can't say it enough, lifelong learners rise. Make sure that you find a way for your young emerging planners or even your mid-level planners to make sure that when they want to be enriched, when they want education, you find a way to do it. And knowledge is management, right? Make knowledge accessible to all of your staff. And when it comes to that succession planning, make sure that you understand that it's not all about you. Your succession isn't personal. It should be for the municipality, for the city, for the staff, for the citizens. It's not about, you're not there anymore. I'm not there anymore. So it doesn't matter what I did. What matters is what's happening right now. So make sure that when you're coming up with that succession plan, that you're not worried about your pet projects or the things that you had passion about continuing, because it might not. Set the expectation that knowledge is shared. Share those passwords, share those registrations on those online platforms that people can get onto, and celebrate those who share and receive knowledge. Put knowledge sharing into work progress. These are 6 things that I really found key. When we did find my successor, I established written procedures. Before that, I had written procedures, but I actually made them based on topic areas like open space preservation, community development block grant programs, redevelopment, zoning and planning administration, affordable housing. I made written procedures in memos on topics so that the new planner has the history and the timeline and the benchmarks so that they don't have to search all over the place or work in the dark. Hire consultants to fill capacity gaps. Sometimes their successor isn't going to have the same skill sets you had, so you might have to backfill that with consultants, and that's going to take time and planning to go through the bidding process and to get the budget amended so that you can get it done. Change your passwords and roles on all platforms, like I mentioned earlier. Introduce your successor to all colleagues and partners. Schedule regular meetings with your replacement so that you can follow up with them on projects that they might be struggling with. Succession planning is many. It's not just one. A lot of people are going to have to pick up the pieces when you leave to keep things moving forward. It just might look different. And that's okay if you recognize that it's not about you. One person bet, I can't say this enough, do not identify a person ahead of time. It's risky. And plans change. The person might leave the organization or is not ready when you might want to be ready to retire. Prepare many, not just one. Use a mix of methods for several people for the next crew chief, deputy director, or assistant city manager role. And so those were my mistakes and my pitfalls. This is my contact information if anybody wants to talk about your succession or whether or not you would like to be the anointed one. I'd be happy to talk with you about how to go about doing it and how not to do it in the future.
Excellent. Tara, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate it. So what we're going to do now, everybody, is we have a couple questions, things that I'd like to ask Tara, but then we'll also keep an eye on the chat. And if you have a question, throw it into the chat and we'll ask it as well. So I will kick it off and say, so Tara, does anyone in government think about succession planning other than the planner, other than you?
Oh, maybe police chief might, maybe public safety has a little bit more of an invested interest in succession planning, but in my experience, no. I tried bringing up the subject 2 years before I retired. I had I'm a planner, right? So I had a long-term plan. I knew that August 1st, 2026 was the first possible day that I could retire. And so in 2024, I started talking to my city manager about it. And it was la, 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 la. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to acknowledge that things could change. When you're there for 26 years in the city office, planning office, and then I was also a board member and an environmental commissioner for 4 years and 5 years before that. So I was a fixture for 30 years. Nobody wanted to talk about it. You have to make it to you. In any way you can get them to do that. You have to be, I call myself a pleasant nag. I would say, hey, in a year and a half when I'm not here anymore, and they don't want to hear about it, but they have to force them to hear it, listen to it. Your staff might be more apt to listening and then helping you get that message through to the management. But they don't, when you have a city manager who's there for a while, you have a mayor for 4 years maybe and there for 4 years, and you're talking about 2 years from now, they're thinking on that 4-year election cycle, not in a 2-year cycle. You got to get them to listen to you.
I think so. I would mirror that, what you just said, and that my experience, there's just, it's not something that pops into people's brains or something they put a lot of thought at until it becomes emergent, right? I've lived both sides of the coin. I remember coming into a position in a city I worked at, and the person that had been in that position had been there for 25 years before me, the only person doing it. Yeah. And so I'm sure there's people on here today who have felt that, where you walk in behind somebody like you and somehow you got to fill those shoes without all the knowledge. Thankfully, she had given some thought about it and knew that she was going to retire and prepared some things. Right. But it can be really painful because you can see where those things weren't prepared. So I'd offer that as a piece of advice to people out there. Not only don't think about it, don't wait to think about it until you're getting ready to leave, but let it be one of the first things you think about when you arrive. Because you become very aware very quickly of where the planning was not, right, taking place. Yeah. And you'll forget that too. So, just as soon as you hit a spot, think about what it's going to be like when you leave. I also found that was helpful for me to just learn the ropes.
Yeah. One of the really valuable things was when my successor, a guy named Bob, who also, he had 20 years of experience. So he's coming in mid-career, and he had some really great insight into things that like I'm struggling with. Like we have these informal concept meetings, and he switched up the way that we did, which was much more efficient than I had, because I just continued with what my predecessor had done, and I still struggled with it and fumbled around with it a little bit. But these informal concept meetings became a little bit more structured, and we we didn't collect an escrow account for the professionals to bill into it. So we established a fee. He established a fee for that. And that was all before I left, because we luckily had a month and a half overlap. So yeah, it about when you come and when you go, it because you're gonna have like what do they say, maternal amnesia, when you don't remember what it's like when you have a kid, when you have a baby, how hard it is at first. You have that amnesia as time goes by. So that's a great suggestion. Make sure that you think about it before coming in the door and going out the door.
All right. Let's ask one from out in the audience. How do you prepare your staff to take up space in a room and show readiness for broader leadership?
Oh, when I think I said it 1,000 times, sending folks to, if they have a desire to go to continuing education classes or higher education, budget for that. You can't just say, oh sure, you can go. You gotta plan for it. You gotta ask administration to budget for it. And then the other thing is that learning curve, right? Is that 10, that 20, and that 70% thing. People are only going to learn by doing. Let them. Prepare your staff by letting them do things on their own, in a room, at a public hearing, in a board meeting, at a city council meeting, in a charrette, or community engagement environment, even report writing, and doing their own research. Give it to them to do. Make them understand that you might have to edit it, you might have to make revisions and whatnot, but prepare your staff by letting them do the work.
Excellent. I agree with that. And I think, that's to your point earlier, it's just a thing that you do through the entire process of you being there, right?
Yeah.
Don't let that be the thing that you're attempting to do because you're walking out the door. It's good practice. And I think, for succession planning, one way to think about it's not just about when you're leaving. It's about having somebody there for when you're just out for a time, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
somebody can handle it so you can take vacation. Like, how many people here don't actually ever have a vacation, right? They're
Listen,
always on.
you just brought me back to a year ago. So a year ago, I had surgery, and I thought, well, this will be a good, training experience for my staff, right? I was supposed to be out for a month. I came back 2 weeks later. I had to do a public hearing at the governing body for an affordable housing plan, and I shouldn't have done that. I could have had someone else do the presentation, but again, learning from my mistakes is they yeah, are they going to sink or are they going to swim? You won't know unless you let them do it. So that was a mistake I made. I didn't trust them enough to answer affordable housing questions and do the presentation themselves. I came in with stitches and and boy, my recovery suffered from it,
Right.
because I should have been out longer, and my recovery took a lot longer. So that was a mistake I made too, is that I didn't, you know, and a lot of times that happens because administration wants you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's another thing that you could do as a director is bring your junior staff with you all the time and let them talk while you are there, because then maybe administration will feel more uncomfortable with them talking when you're not there. So that was a lesson learned for me, is that I should have let my junior staff be more present, so that when I was out sick, I could have been sick.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that your recovery did eventually complete. How about we never hired someone to replace a person retiring before they retire? So this is not me saying this, but this is definitely me experiencing it. I think everybody can experience, right? Retirement almost never comes as a shock. You see it way off. You can see people approaching retirement, but unfortunately, it just never lines up. How much overlap time do you think is good to aim for?
Okay, so you're right. We in government, you have to know when you're retiring, right? Unless it's for an illness reason or something that was unforeseen. But like you have to plan with HR, you have to plan with your pension system. The whole world knows you're retiring, right? Um, I think so. I made all these mistakes. I got lucky, right? I got lucky, and we found someone to replace me who, like I said, had 20 years of experience. He had been a municipal planner before, and a director of a city, actually a little bit larger than ours. Um, and he had been working in private consulting for the past couple of years. So so he started on June 15th, and I retired on August 1st. So I really feel like that was great. It was actually 7 weeks. He had a pre-planned vacation, so he was away for a week of that. So really 6 weeks, I think, um, was a good amount of time for you to be there and overlap. Um, like I said, we had I created those memos, those topic memos for the transition. We sat and we talked about it. I transitioned him into the boards for a while there. We had a consulting planner covering the zoning board of adjustment and the planning board meetings and doing the development and review applications, because if for some reason some of those cases, which some of them were controversial and were going to take a lot more meetings than I was going to be there for, we wanted to have consistency with having the same planner reviewing and testifying for those cases. So we had a consulting planner covering the board. So when my successor planner came in, he then went to the board meetings and sat with her, and then transitioned out of that too. So I would say at least 6 weeks. If you have the luxury of 2 months, that would be great too. But then again, budgeting. You have to make sure that you budget for the two salaries at the same time, folks. Business administrators aren't always so happy with you when you're
I,
doing that.
that's a great point. The budgeting and even if you can get the budget, there is just the standards for hiring, right? Some organizations, even if you had it in the budget, they don't have a standard for hiring for two positions, or having two positions filled for a period. Their software may not recognize that possibility. And so you need to reach out well in advance. I ran into this one because, to the broader point of succession planning, it's not just for directors, right? There's all sorts of positions throughout various departments that may be at any level of critical. And so that person, you want to make sure leaves their knowledge behind in that position. You want to make sure doesn't stay open too long. And if your software hasn't been set up in a way that allows HR to activate those, or whoever it is that does your hiring, to activate that job requisition until it's vacant. Because I would run into that. I'd say, hey, can we post this job now? And they would say, no, we can't post the job until this thing's been clicked off or this person's actually gone. And I'd pull my hair out. They're like, what do you mean? We can't even post it till they're gone. So I have to be empty.
We didn't have that problem, but
So
I would probably do a workaround to that and hire them as a consultant. Oh,
so I think it's just, and then eventually it got figured out. It just, the software hadn't been configured that way, because when we'd moved to the new software, somebody hadn't thought about we may need overlap. Because before we had that software, you just handled it, right?
yeah.
Just be
Yeah.
aware that in a world that where digital assets play an important part, kind of to the next question we've got coming, that they have their limitations too, aside from our workplace practices and people's hopes and desires. There's like now this third layer. I'd also kind of bring this question and tie it into something you said in the earlier question, which is making sure that you're there and you're giving people the space to learn without you, right? And you mentioned that somebody was out during the transition period. I actually tried that as I was transitioning out of a job, and I recommend that to people. If your transition period is long enough, have a space where you're gone on purpose. Right.
Yeah.
So that, to Tara's point earlier about the presentation, you don't want people's first experience of that position without you to be when you're gone and you can't come back and support.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said earlier, the mistake that I made when I had surgery, I think that I should have probably had, maybe one of the reasons why my anointed successor didn't work was because I didn't let him have enough exposure to, the governing body and the administration without me enough, right? So that he could shine, because he was great. He was going to be great. He is great, but he's just great for somebody else right now. I did is benefiting somebody else, but that's okay. As long as he's being successful. That's one of the things too, as a city manager, is that, when I said earlier about, you're mentoring not just only your own staff, you're mentoring planners at all levels of exposure that you have, right? Like you're mentoring consultants, emerging planners, you're mentoring students if you're teaching, you're mentoring community members who might decide to become a planner at some point or volunteer on one of your boards or your commissions, and giving them the ability to grow and learn and accumulate their own knowledge without you is one of the things that I think that I think it's okay, but I probably could have done it better.
I think we can all say that we could do these things better after the fact. So here's another one for us. Digital assets really benefited me when I took over the long-term planning director, who is an institution within the municipality. Thankfully, that person set up project management folders for reference. Sounds like the way you did your memos.
Yeah.
And then the questioner built their own system of management around that. Yeah. Are there tools, digital or otherwise, that you can speak to or which could be implemented?
Yeah. So this is what we did. I hate to admit this, but I keep papers and paper files. I'm like a hoarder. My husband called me a hoarder the other day. But I also had everything digitally. So I sat down with my successor and I went through what I saved, what I had in my digital management with I had a network drive for all the grants, a network drive for the floodplain management and the CRS program, a network drive for all of my planning files, which included all my board reviews, an affordable housing digital file. And then I had everything broken out by topic, not year, although inside them I had by year. And I sat down with my successor and I asked him if he could understand what was in my head, because that was how everything was organized. And it took him a day or two, but he came back to me and he's like, I understand what you think, but I'm going to rework this. And so we worked with our IT department to rework things while I was there so that there were no gaps, nothing got missed, nothing got lost, nothing got misplaced, so that he would have a full record of all of my digital files. And then the paper files that I was the hoarder for, we have an archive. Luckily, we have an archive department, and we worked with our archivist, and he scanned everything and then created a digital version of the paper files. So now my successor actually has everything in the network, how he can understand it and where he can find it. And I'm not there. So he actually texted me the week after I retired, and he said, He was looking for an appraisal for an open space property. And I hadn't renamed those appraisals. They come in from the consultant with the consultant's name on them. So I said, here's a little tidbit. They're the largest file. They're the largest document in those files. So he was like, oh, that's them, right? So now he's reworking it that way. But yeah, the digital aspect of handing over all that knowledge, um, it was exhausting. I was working like 10-hour days trying to make sure that I was going to make it as easy as possible for him to try and find everything. But like I said, he figured out how my head worked, so he was able to rework it in the way that he could use it the best.
And I think that's a great point. It is exhausting, because if you're, especially as you're doing this towards the end where you've been running things your way, the way that worked for you for so long, and then you have to figure out a way to make that make sense to everybody else. To everybody here, don't underestimate how not only intellectually tiring that can be, but emotionally exhausting it can be, because it's thinking about somebody else's perspective. And if you're lucky, you have that person there to inform you on their perspective.
Right.
Likely, based on the questions that we have, and I think a lot of people's experience, you won't. And so you're kind of guessing at what that person's going to be like.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that you could do as you get off this call later today is sit down and think about, this is something I learned in my real estate world, because on right-of-way projects, you're regularly turning over project managers and negotiators. And so the methodology for managing those is very standard. At the same time, it relies heavily on individual ability. Like a negotiator develops an emotional connection with the people with whom they're negotiating, but everything they do has to be able to be dumped on a person's desk at a moment's notice and picked up by that next person. You can put yourself in that framework as you do some of your work, and create a structure that is more than just understandable by you in your day-to-day, right? Then you can shortcut some of that end work.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, yeah, I'm a binder person too. Like I guess hoarders have binders too. And having a policy and procedure manual, which also talks about how the files are saved and where they're rather than just the procedure. Also, it was going to be very helpful to him, especially with our community development block grant program and with our FEMA CRS program. Having that, because those two programs are auditable. And that was like one of my fears, is that I wasn't going to leave my successor with all of the tools and the information necessary to do well in those audits, right? And those, it's still a little bit of a fear in me that, like, when if they get audited by CDBG, or if they get audited, every year on October, you submit your community rating system review. If they didn't do well because they couldn't find something or they didn't understand the way something went, I would be responsible for that. So putting together that policy and procedure manual with also that how to information or where from information is super important.
100%. As far as the digital assets, one that I would plug for people is OneNote. Yep. I really appreciated that. It's made for a note-taking software, right? But in the end, notes are really how we transmit information to our future self from our past self and from one person to another. And it is very easy to manipulate. It's very easy to create forms that can then be transferred in, and checklists. It is a super robust program that, if you can take the time to become a power user, you can get a lot out of it. But there's so much to it that it's kind of like Excel. You don't actually meet a lot of people who ever become that sort of power user. It has so much capability.
Yeah.
But I've used that multiple times to create, here, like you're saying, procedure manuals or standards, and useful tools for people. So that was one of the things I left behind for my successor when I left my last planning department. I won't represent whether or not it was actually useful. Felt useful to me when I was making it. It'll be
Some
up to them
people,
to decide if it is, but
yes, some people are checklist people and some people are not. I am a box checker. So I have in my policy and procedure manual, I have a checklist in every tab, right? So
mhm.
for community development block grant, for every project, I had a checklist, and that harkens back to the auditing thing. Um, Even for the community rating system, I had checklists for everything. Obviously, for development and review, we use checklists for everything. So when I went out the door, I added a checklist. The governing body adopt checklists for complete streets and vision zero. And that was interesting because that was something that I've been working on for 20 years. And it came down to my last public hearing. And my successor was there, and he celebrated the fact that I was able to accomplish it finally on my way out the door. But yeah, checklists definitely are, if you are someone who uses them, like you said, you don't know if they're being used now. But I really think that they are a way to communicate how to go about doing things if somebody comes in new.
Absolutely. And something like OneNote or another similar program gives you the opportunity to build that binder, like Terry you talked about, and so you get the feeling. Like I think a lot of us have used binders and things like that in the past, especially if you've been doing this for a while. It gives you that feeling of it, but at the same time, it gives you the benefit of searchability that comes with using a digital tool and being able to tab and mark in specific ways. So find those digital tools. I really liked OneNote. You can do it as a PDF and then you can mark things in there, right? But find something that allows for searchability would be my recommendation.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
We've got one here. So um, this is going to be, I think, one that you can speak to very particularly. What do you do when the person you identified as the successor does not become the successor? Whether it's them for another reason or maybe even they got promoted in the organization otherwise. What do you do?
I cry. I cried.
There you go. Just do that and
No,
then wait for it to get better on its own. Perfect. I think that's great advice.
no, I didn't cry. You know what? So I'll tell you the story. So this young man, his name's Vinny, came to me as an intern before my predecessor retired. So he had been working with us as an unpaid intern for credit. Then when my predecessor retired, I convinced they wouldn't. So a little bit of background. I was the assistant planner for 18 years. My supervisor was the principal planner for 25 years. 18 of those of what no, I think about 18 of his 25 years I was there as his assistant planner. So I wasn't totally his assistant. I did assist him on some things, but we had separate work products and separate responsibilities. I was the board of adjustment planner, he was the planning board planner. I did all the grant work, he did except for the community development block grant, he did that. I did all the master plan writing and presentations to the planning board, and he did a lot of the budgeting and administration and working with administration. So we had distinct roles. When he retired, which was 9 years ago, 10 years ago, we were at a point where the administration said, we're not hiring an assistant planner for you. You're going to do both jobs, the doing more with less idea, right? So but because I had been the assistant planner for 18 years, I was able to transition into the planning position, principal planner position and supervisor role because I've been there. So let me hire this young man, Vinny, to be a clerk. They hired him in the title of clerk. And for 7 years or 6 years, I tried to get them to put him in a planning aid title. Why? This is in urban regional planning, by the way. Um, and they just didn't want to fill that assistant planner title. It wasn't about salary, it wasn't about anything. They just didn't want to have two basically department heads in the hierarchy of the leadership ladder. So It was frustrating, super frustrating. And a couple of times I said to him, I saw a posting for a planner titles, in another town or another county. And he's like, no, 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 no. He's a hometown guy. He wanted to be there. So he stuck it out for a long time until he came into me one day with a letter, and I'll never forget this. I just have to show you. He stood at the door with the letter in his hand like this, like his fingernails were turning white. And I said, "What's the matter?" He just handed the letter to me, and it was an offer letter for a position for 1/3 more of what he was making, where he was, working with us, and the title that he wanted. It was for an assistant planner title. How Oh, right. How could I make him feel like he should stay? So I looked at it and I said, "You have to go. You have to." He looked at me and he knew that was the answer. But that put me in a position where, holy crap, what am I going to do now? This happened at the beginning of this year. I knew I was retiring in August. So that really pushed forward the urgency to advertise for my title, get the administrator to stop putting her fingers in her ear and listen to me about hiring someone who was, adept enough to pick up a position for a planning director in a community of 75,000 people. So what I did was I encouraged him to go and just stomped on my business administrator's floor and made her listen so that we could find someone, which we luckily did, in Bob, the new planner. So I hope that answered your question.
I think that was great. And I think I want to pull out something I've heard you say many, many times as we prepared for this, is that for succession planning, don't make it about you, make it about the position, right? And I think an important part of that, continuing that thought, that thread of thought, is while the hiring process should be about the candidate, finding the very specific right candidate, I would venture that the training process, the succession, should not be. It should just be about whomever falls
Yeah.
there. So don't make it about you as you're leaving. Don't make it about them as they're coming in. Whatever you're giving them, certainly you want to make sure that you're providing them what they need. But so much of what we're going to pass on needs to pass on to whomever comes in. And it won't change based on who it is, right?
About the continuity of the work, right? It's not about the individual at all. Because one of the things when people would say to me, "Oh, Tara, we're so sad you're leaving. What are we going to do without you?" My answer would be, "But it's replaceable.
Yeah.
Replaceable. The person doing the work having a person to do the work first, the most important thing. But everybody's replaceable, and if you know that, and if you know that, succession planning is not about you, it's about the work. It's about we're civil servants, we're city planners, we're city managers, we're civil servants. The point of us being where we are is to serve the public. And that is what has to continue, is serving the public. So having that continuity between the planning directors and the continuity of always making sure the work is central to it and the service to the public, that's why you have to plan ahead for this. And that's why you have to make people listen to you, even if they don't want to listen to you outside of an election cycle. You need to try and be that pleasant nag, like I call myself. Yeah, it is not about you. It is about the continuity of the work and the civil servant's role in serving the public.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Just so everybody knows, we have 10 minutes left. I really like this question. I think this is a great one. So let's throw it your way and see what you think, Tara. Attending this webinar as a new planner, any tips on how to professionally and successfully request that leadership start working on succession materials? I've had experiences where supervisors were offended by requests around the topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Not everyone is as egoless as you and I, Travis. So that's a sticky one. One of the things that I find the best way to communicate the need to do that is to ask for cross training. Um, Request that, first of all, you ask to do something a little bit out of your own silo, right? Ask to learn if you're maybe a transportation planner and you're working on, traffic counts and road design and safe routes to school or something like that. Ask to do something a little bit outside of that, like development and review, or land use reviews, so that it's really in your silo, to branch out a little bit. Couch it in the fact that maybe you need to get more experience to take your AICP exam. Supervisors to help you study. Get a different level of relationship with them than just supervisor and employee. Try and ask for mentorship. I think that people do get stuck in silos, and they're so protective of their work because they're afraid if somebody else learns how to do their job that they're less valuable. I see it exactly the opposite. I see it as people who have more broad capabilities are more valuable, because people get sick, people get married, have babies, people medicals, people go serve in the military or in the National Guard, and there are vacancies always at some point. And being able to jump in and cross train and do more with less makes you a more valuable employee. So that's where I would start. I would start with asking for a little bit more opportunity to branch out of what your role and your title is right now.
I would agree with that. As somebody who was responsible for filling those vacancies, and then at least my sense, my feeling when I was in that leadership role was, if there was a vacancy below me, that the first person that was responsible for filling in on that work product was me. Now, I might send it to other people for any number of reasons, but that buck stopped with me. It moved up, not down. So I was really excited when somebody was willing to learn. It's like, hey, you sure you want to do that? Because
Yeah.
that means you may be doing it. So
Yeah.
I think, to Tara's point, just let people know that you're open. I get the sense that in your question, you are running into issues where people become offended because they feel like they're maybe being pushed out or replaced or losing control, as Tara was mentioning too. And so one of the ways that I think you could tackle that is by creating a culture of succession, right? And culture isn't just top down, it's bottom up and side to side. And so creating succession tools and plans for your position. The organization that I worked at went roughly planner, associate planner was the entry level planner position, planner tech or associate planner, then planner one, planner two, senior planner, principal planner, assistant director, right? Just because the associate planner is entry level doesn't mean it doesn't need a succession plan. That position actually did quite a bit. It was very broad, and we had designed it for somebody to really only be there about a year and a half, hoping that a position would open up, but they were supposed to promote out of it. So it's supposed to be churning, which means it
Yeah.
needs a succession plan. Now, for
Right.
most people, that is what they call that a training plan, right? And the concept is, well, the work sticks with the person who got promoted until it gets filled, and then you have a way to train them. That's largely the succession plan for anybody, right? And so I would say one of the things that you could do, even where you're a new planner, is it doesn't take long for nobody to know your job better than you do. Start your own succession plan. What's it look like when you start turning that job over? Because if you want to get promoted, trust me, you're going to want to be able to turn that over quickly, because I don't know of a lot of organizations where they say, well, you're promoted, but you don't have to keep doing the work you're doing until it gets filled. Most places are going to make you want to do it, and you want to shovel that off as fast as possible. So create your own. And then I think people might see, one, that that's what you're doing. You're just trying to create tools that benefit the organization. Two, to Tara's point, you get the opportunity to learn something else because you can say, well, hey, I'll go over here and I'll create it for these people too.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, Travis, is that, entry level positions are supposed to always be entry level. What happens when you're not promoted or you don't have the opportunity to grow is you leave. So either way, you get promoted, you're going to need someone to fill that position to do that work. That is what that position is for. So I'm sorry that you've run into people who are protective of what their job roles and duties are, but communicating that you're not a threat is also a good um like I said, couch it in, hey, listen, I want to take my ACP exam, can you give me some insight into what you're doing so that I can learn how to do that and adequately be able to take my test.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you're not going to be able to manage everybody's concerns or fears, so just be aware. All right, we got 3 minutes left. Take a look at your screen. There's some information on there about registering for the next director's dialogue. Volunteers are always we're always looking for volunteers here. Keep in mind that a call will be going out for the mentoring program, both for mentees and mentors. We certainly need mentors. It is such a great program. I've been a mentor. I found it personally enriching doing that. So highly recommend that if you have the time, which is not very much, to do that. I'm going to, if I can impose on you for one last minute, Tara, I'm going to ask you what I think is probably a big question. If there's one mistake that you think organizations make, not the person being replaced or moving on, but that organizationally organizations make on developing succession plans, what would it be?
They don't budget. They don't budget. Organizations, I think about a city, the core of the operation of the city is the budgeting. And that's really the main planning document. It's not the master plan, it's the budget. And when a municipality doesn't budget for education, doesn't budget for certification maintenance, licensing, or certification fees, it doesn't budget for the overlap when there is the succession happening. That's the main mistake municipalities, cities make, is that they don't look at their budget as a planning document and don't adequately plan for succession.
Excellent. That is really good advice. Thank you so much. All right. We're just at time. I will keep an eye on the Q&A in case there's any. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad that everybody found it helpful. All right. And then Patrice, it looks like we've got one. The QR code is for today's event, not November. So
it should be the same because it's a recurring meeting, but if you
excellent.
don't get it, just be on the lookout for the newsletter and everything. We'll get it sent out to everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Michaela, thank you for letting us know that. All right. Tara, thanks for taking the time today. Really appreciate you being here and sharing all of your experience with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was truly a pleasure working with all of you.
Absolutely. Same here. All right, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Good rest of your week. And we'll see you next time.